ever since Reagan let these people into his administration. They were all basically Democrats, left-wing Democrats, but they were unhappy that the Democratic Party was not as warmongering as they would like it to be, and so they thought they could take over the Republican Party and still be advocates of the welfare state. The late Irving Kristol called himself the godfather of neoconservatism. And he actually wrote an essay in his son's magazine, the Weekly Standard, about it. And he said the only reason we ever supported Reagan's economic policies, tax cuts, is that we know it takes a lot of money to be a world empire. And so we wanted to grow the economy so that we can then steal more billions from the taxpayers and use it to invade the world. That's what he didn't use those exact words, but you look up Irving Kristol, godfather of neoconservatism, you'll find that on the web where he said that. And so that's why they fooled a lot of people into thinking they were sort of Jack Kemp tax cut advocates in the 80s, but not really, not really. I guess we get another lady there.
Yeah, so I had a quick question. You have gone after Abe Lincoln several times. I agree with you wholeheartedly on your attacks, but what really inspired you? Because there's been so many bad presidents over the years. Why Abe Lincoln? Why the intense focus on him in particular? Well,
I read 2 books. My first book was called The Real Lincoln. I was interested in Civil War history for many years, and the more I read about it, I thought, well, I'm an economist, and I was never taught in school what I learned in my hobby, that Abe Lincoln was involved almost exclusively in all the big economic issues of the day for about 25 years before he ran for president. And he never mentioned a word about slavery until I think 1853, but he entered politics in 1832. And I thought it was odd that he was a big champion of protectionist tariffs, a central bank, and what we today would call corporate welfare or subsidies for railroad corporations. He was the general counsel for the Illinois Central Railroad for a while. He represented all the major railroads in the Midwest. So I thought this is a story that should be told that has been swept under the rug. And historians write about it, but they don't know much about economics, and they never understood the importance of this kind of thing. So I wrote this book about that, and then the more I got into it, the more I researched Lincoln, from a libertarian perspective. I thought it was a really good thing that he shut down 300 opposition newspapers.
Oh, God.
And illegally suspended the writ of habeas corpus and imprisoned maybe 30,000 northern state dissenters, including newspaper editors and things like that. He put the grandson of Francis Scott Key in prison in Fort McHenry, of all places, because he editorialized against the illegal suspension of habeas corpus, which Lincoln's own attorney general said was illegal and unconstitutional.
Yep.
And why didn't we end slavery peacefully like all the other countries of the world did? As an economist, we always think of opportunity cost, or the alternatives. In the British Empire, the French, the Danes, the Dutch, the Spaniards, the Swedes, they all ended slavery. Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, they all ended slavery without a war. Why couldn't we? And so, I was interested in that question. And I'm not the only one. Other people have written about that sort of thing. So that's how, from an economist perspective, I got to write a book about Lincoln. That most of it is about his economic policies that have been swept under the rug by historians, mostly because they don't know anything about it. They talk about it, but they don't know it. And I also discovered that his whole life, he wanted to deport all the black people. They called it colonization. There's a book that was written a few years ago called Colonization After Emancipation that showed that up to his dying day, he was putting his head together with William Seward, the Secretary of State, to count the number of ships we had to ship all the free slaves someplace. He was cutting deals with England and other countries for land somewhere else. And so, and the historians mention that. It's in their books. But about this much space in a 1,000-page book, you'll read about colonization. And that's why, I discovered also that Lerone Bennett Jr., who was the editor of Ebony magazine for 100 years, a long time, wrote a book on Lincoln that's even more critical than me, much more critical than me about these things, because he saw these facts that they deport all the black people, and when they opposed slavery in the new territories, the reason they gave it basically was that Lincoln's own words. He said, "We want to protect the territories for free white labor." They didn't want, and all these territories which were run by the northern states for the most part, made it illegal for black people to move in there, free black people at the time. And if they did, they couldn't be citizens. They couldn't testify in court against white people, and they really had no civil liberties at all. And so that's one of the ugly truths of American history that you read about. And so that's why a libertarian would take a sort of a jaundiced view of all the Lincoln worship.
So definitively fair to say that Lincoln was not trying to free the slaves.
Well, no serious historian, she's tape recording this.
I am.
Well, no serious historian would say that the war was
My audience loves
started to
this.
free the slaves. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I was taught this myth that men from Pennsylvania died by the thousands for the benefit of black strangers in Mississippi. But no serious historian will say that. It became an issue in the middle of the war, after the North started losing in the middle of the war. But Lincoln himself, quoted in my books, is saying, "I have no purpose to free the slaves." He said, "My purpose is to save the Union." He said in a famous letter to Horace Greeley, "If I could do it by not freeing any slaves, I would do it. If I could free some and leave others in bondage, I would do that too," he said. And then the United States Senate issued a war proclamation, also at the beginning of the war, saying it had nothing to do with Southern slavery. It had saving the Union was the purpose of the war. And then in Lincoln's first inaugural address, if you read the inaugural address, I call it his Slavery Forever speech, where he says, if you read any of my speeches, I know I'd have no intention of disturbing slavery. He said it'll be unconstitutional for me as president to do anything like this. And then at the end of the speech, he supported a constitutional amendment that would have forbidden the federal government from ever interfering in Southern slavery. It was called the Corwin Amendment. You can look it up on the web, C-O-R-W-I-N, named after Ohio congressman. It's right in Lincoln's first inaugural address. So when I say these things, the historians go crazy because I just quote Abe Lincoln's own words. And one of my articles, I went through his collected works, and it was called, it was on LouRockwell.com. After the Black Lives Matter movement got Princeton University to get rid of the statue of Woodrow Wilson, I guess, at Princeton, because he resegregated the military, among other things, Woodrow Wilson. So I wrote an article on Lou Rockwell saying, well, here's the next target for the Black Lives Matter movement is Abe Lincoln. And I put together about 20 of his speeches that would make David Duke blush. All throughout it, I gave, the Collected Works, Volume 2, page 123 and all that. So if you want to read this stuff, it's on LouRockwell.com. You can find it as far as that goes. And so that's another thing that has endeared me to the academic world. Walter Williams had me on the Rush Limbaugh show when my book came out in 2002. He was a guest host. And he said, "Rush is sick. I'm going to host the show." He calls me up at 7 o'clock in the morning. And so sure, it was me and Walter for a whole hour on Rush's show. And my book went to number 2 in sales on Amazon the next day. And so whenever I have one of these professors write me a piece of hate mail, I just compare my book sales to his on Amazon. Not that it means I'm right, but it just sort of sticks a knife in a little bit.
I love it. Stick it in and twist it.